I married Sal Dano in 6 or 7 weeks because I was attracted to him and wouldn't sleep with him. You know, how stupid is that?
Intimate Portrait, Linda Dano. Next on Intimate Portrait, hosted by Meredith Vieira.
I'm Meredith Vieira, and this is an intimate portrait of Linda Dano. For 17 years, she played romance novelist Felicia Gallant on Another World. But when the longtime soap was canceled, it didn't stop Linda. In fact, she went on to star in 4 soaps as the captivating Greta Ray Cummings. But while she was glamorous on screen, off-screen, Linda battled her weight and the aging process, going public with her struggles with both. Here's Judith Light with the story of an enduring star.
Best known for her work on daytime drama, Linda Dano didn't plan to be an actress, but her beauty catapulted her into a modeling career at a very young age. Her acting talent was the unexpected bonus.
Linda Dano has this unbelievable talent to really ignite whatever scene she's in.
Her charm and vivacity gave her a parallel career as a talk show host.
She's got this incredible honesty. She's funny. And she's quirky, and people don't expect that from someone who looks like she does.
I married everyone I ever slept with. That's it. I'm from that, you know, Liz Taylor school of womanhood.
This is not somebody who sits around and lets grass grow. If she wants to become a nuclear physicist, she will find a way. And she will be the most fabulously accessorized nuclear physicist you will ever see.
She has survived the deaths of loved ones and conquered a long-term eating disorder. Today, she thrives as a designer, author, and the first-time ever character starring on all 4 ABC daytime dramas.
She survives by adapting, seeing the opportunities, seeing that change is good, embracing it. She's brave and she's lovely.
I'm Judith Light, and this is my friend, Linda Dano. For Linda Dano, family has always been the center of her life, starting with her parents, Evelyn and Ted Wildermuth.
I always have said my father was like John Wayne. He was big, had great big hands, like meat hook hands. And he always worked. During the Depression, he had 3 jobs when people didn't have one.
When Linda was born in Long Beach, California on May 12, 1943, her father had just been in a terrible car accident.
He almost died. And he was in the hospital for a long time. I came home from the hospital, and then shortly after my father was released, and he came home.
He came in, got into bed, and then I brought the baby to him. And that was the beginning of a great love affair.
My father was very passionate and very loving. My mother's much more reserved than my father. But my father was also an extremist in everything. If he loved you, he loved you.
Linda's father had a real estate and insurance business, and her mother, who had a flair for style, owned a knit shop.
My mother always dressed me up, and we didn't have money. My mother used to make a lot of stuff.
And we would go to these really nice stores and look at clothes, and she'd pick out something that she thought was great. She says, "Mother, you can make this." I said, "I know I could."
Linda adored her big brother, Jack Wildermuth, who was 7 years older.
My brother was very rebellious, not a good student, but he would take care of me. So there was always someone there, and my grandmother was always in my life every day. My grandmother was probably first and foremost my brother's and mine best friend.
Grandma was one who went out and had sundaes and sodas and candy and all the good stuff.
My grandmother was beyond generous to us. you just knew you were loved. I know that my grandmother had a profound effect on me in wanting to grab onto life because she told me I could.
Many things came easily to Linda, who was a talented artist and a very good student in school.
One of the main reasons that I was an honor student was Linda Cabada. She was so good at everything. She was just so smart. And I wanted to be smart like that.
Linda was very popular. She was in a girls' club when I met her, and I believe she was president of that girls' club. When I first saw her, I just couldn't believe how great looking she was and great personality and a lot of fun.
When I first got to high school, I met Jeff, home, my first love.
Typical California teens in the 50s, their lives were centered around school and cars.
Our high school had a facility called the Canteen, and you could go there after football games, and they had pool, and you would dance and have something to eat. And other times we'd just drive and spend a lot of time in the drive-in theaters.
I was never intimate with him. I was such a good girl. Couldn't do that. That wasn't right. You did that when you got married. So I really thought we'd get married.
Her mother was very much of a driver. She knew that she wanted Linda to pursue a certain career.
It actually began in my last year of high school. There was a contest called the Miss Lands contest.
Lands was a clothing line, and when she was named Miss Lands, that was big news in our school.
Part of my award and gifts that they give you was to go to the Patricia Stevens modeling school.
Linda was always being told to watch her weight because of the modeling. And so her mother would bring out a peach pie for me to, have a piece of. Well, Linda liked the peach pies, and she loved all the things that she couldn't eat.
The fact that I couldn't have it at home, that made me want to go out and have it wherever I could. See, that's one of the reasons my grandmother was so cool. Want a candy? Okay. She didn't care.
We dated from the time she just finished junior high up through the time that she was, I believe, about a junior in high school. And then things changed.
My mother and Jeff's mother both thought we were just too young to get married.
Her dad says, we're going to break this off, and let's don't hear any more about it. I mean, he just put his foot down. And she cried and carried on.
And at the time, it was hard to understand, but looking back on it now, that was the right thing. And she certainly has accomplished all the things that she wanted to.
When she graduated from high school, Linda went on to California State College at Long Beach.
I was a liberal arts major. I went to school on a partial scholarship. I painted. I never wanted to be an actor. It never even crossed my mind.
But modeling opportunities kept cropping up, whether she wanted them or not.
I went with Jeanette Wright up to see Nina Blanchard, modeling agency, who we looked up in the phone book.
Nina Blanchard walked out and saw Linda sitting there. She says, have you come to see me? Linda said, oh, no, I haven't come to see you. She says, well, why don't you come in and we'll talk about it.
The face was extraordinary. And what I think I was mostly taken by was the vivaciousness. I mean, she just came on like a train wreck. You could not ignore her. She was not a shy wallflower type. And she had a great boisterous laugh, she had marvelous attitude, and she was so beautiful.
Linda's career as a model took off, and she appeared in ad campaigns for products including Max Factor and Curl Free by Tony. But there was one big problem. Linda still loved to eat. It wasn't long before she found a way to keep her weight down.
Bulimia was my out, because I could eat the cookie and then go eat the cheeseburger and the fries and then the cake and whatever else I wanted, and I could throw up, and I wouldn't gain weight. Of course, I was killing myself, and I was ruining my teeth and my skin and, all the things that girls do, but that's why they do it. It's a terrible, terrible disease.
Coming up on Intimate Portrait, as a 20th Century Fox contract player, the confident model becomes a terrified actress.
We didn't want to tell him, but I don't think either one of us had had any training.
Later, she would become one of daytime TV's most popular stars. Intimate Portrait will return in a moment. I'm Judith Light, and this is Linda Dano, An Intimate Portrait. In 1965, Linda Dano became a contract player at 20th Century Fox, where she made friends with another neophyte, Tom Selleck.
We would have acting classes, dance classes, and voice classes. The dance classes were pretty interesting for me.
You haven't lived till you see Tom Selleck trying to do ballet.
We also did scenes from upcoming movies. We would do dramatic scenes or comedic scenes. And I was often paired up with Linda in those.
They used to put us in these stupid little shows, and they'd make all the execs from 20th come and watch I'm sure they were just thrilled to come and see this. God, did we cling to each other because we were both terrified.
As close as they were, Linda and Tom were just friends. For the 70s, Linda's romantic life was remarkably old-fashioned.
I married everyone I ever slept with. That's it. I'm from that, Liz Taylor's school of womanhood. Oh, I can't sleep with you. I have to be married to you. I married 3 men.
Her first marriage to a boy from Long Beach had been unhappy and brief. The second was somewhat more successful.
I married Sal Dano in 6 or 7 weeks of meeting him because I was attracted to him and wouldn't sleep with him. How stupid is that? He was an actor/teacher. In fact, he started his drama workshop in California. In fact, I helped him do that.
She said, Sal is teaching acting. You should come to class. So that started probably 8 to 10 years of me studying with Sal and hanging out with Sal and Linda and everybody in the class.
In the early 70s, Linda worked in episodic TV, but her fears continued to plague her.
I worked a lot. I just think I was so afraid. People would talk to me about, what do you want in this scene? And my eyes would glaze over. I don't know, for it to be over?
But while she studied and worked, her second marriage unraveled.
I knew it early on, that this was a mistake. How could I get a divorce? No one in my family had ever been divorced. So had a set of circumstances not happened, I would probably still be there. Or I would weigh 700 pounds, but I would still be there.
Linda thought her life was about to change when she finally got a lead on a sitcom, The Montefuscos, along with actor John Aprea.
Everyone was saying, well, we were going to be this huge hit. Well, we weren't a big hit. We were off, I think, on the 3rd week.
Nobody from NBC came down on the floor and said, I'm sorry, you've been canceled, whatever. We were literally rehearsing as they were breaking down all the sets and taking the furniture out.
Not long after that disappointment, Linda went on a commercial audition and met someone who would change her life.
I was the creative director of a $160 million agency, and she came in very nervously, talking 100 miles an hour. And I said, never mind who let you in, who let you out? She was just so hyper. And I was smitten with her. I just absolutely was bowled over.
If there is such a thing in life that we all have met in other lives, I've met Frank. The moment he opened his mouth, it was a connect. From the moment, there was something electric about him.
Though deeply attracted, Linda had serious doubts about the relationship at first.
He lived in New York. He was separated. I needed this guy like a hole in the head. He had 2 kids, and I live in California. I'm trying to have a career here. It was not going to be a good thing.
I was absolutely convinced that I had found truly my mate. She has beautiful eyes, but they say that that's the, windows to the soul, and I just knew it.
And he called me every day, and I called him, and this went on for months, and we had never been together. And one day he said, meet me in Chicago. And in a weak moment, I went, okay.
They met at a hotel in Chicago, and after a long romantic dinner, the moment arrived.
Now Frank is in the bed. And I said, okay, this is the deal. I never work out, and I have a lot of cellulite, and I think I'll just take off all my clothes and I'll twirl around really fast, and if that's acceptable, then I'll get into the bed. If it's not, I totally get it. If this really is not for you, I'll just get my clothes back on, and his eyes were like this big. He's looking at me like I am from another planet. And I did it. I turned around, I did the whole thing, and he went, oh, for God's sakes, get into bed. That was the beginning of our togetherness. We had a wild night of sex. It went on until dawn, and I said to him at the end of it, when the sun was coming up, I said, I can't possibly be with you, I just can't. And he said, why? I said, because to be perfectly honest, you're an animal, and I cannot keep this up. And this is why you will love my Frank. He went, thank God. I had been working out for weeks getting ready for this night.
Linda finally agreed to move to New York to be with Frank, but leaving her parents was the hardest thing she'd ever done.
And every day my father would do that father guilt thing about leaving and abandoning him, and here I am in bed, and I had Mother turn the picture the other way so I can't see your face. He actually said stuff like that.
We were heartbroken that she moved to New York. That was the worst thing that could have happened to her, we thought. And it was a tragic thing for us.
It was probably the first time in my life I ever did something that my father didn't want me to do.
Linda and Frank planned to marry, but then they learned of a tragic development.
Her brother Jack got sick when he was about 38, 39, and he got cancer.
He had cancer of the esophagus, and it cut off his food going down into his stomach. They made a hole in the side, and we had to feed him through that hole.
My brother, just before he had gotten sick, had bought a motorcycle.
So she went out and bought him this extraordinary leather jacket and pants and stuff.
And we went for the last ride he ever took on that bike. And he wore the jacket and he wore the hat. Went up to the top of a mountain. He said, you gotta make sure they sprinkle me over this mountain. This is where I want to be.
And he said, it's gonna be okay, Linda. Grandma's waiting for me. It makes me cry.
I've spent all of my life making nice. All of my life. Making things work at home, between the family. Making bad things go away. Making it happy. I couldn't make my brother's illness go away. I just couldn't.
Because of their sorrow, Linda and Frank had a small, quiet wedding around Christmas. A few months later, Jack passed away. Coming up on Intimate Portrait, out of work, Linda looks into the void.
I almost became suicidal. I did. I'd never not worked.
Later, she reinvents herself with attitudes.
We were nominated for an Emmy as Best Daytime Talk Show Host.
Intimate Portrait will return after this. We now return to Linda Dano, an Intimate Portrait. In Los Angeles, Linda had worked in episodic TV. But in order to be with Frank, she moved in 1979 to New York, where most of the acting work is in the soaps.
I worked in New York fairly soon after I got here, about 3 months. I played Gretel Cummings on One Life to Live.
I started playing Bo Buchanan in November of 1979, and that's when I met Linda. My mouth dropped open. I thought she was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen.
And while you're at it, would you please tell me what her problem is?
It's a temporary case.
I played that character for 2.5 years. Frank said, I think you have to leave unless they give you a real story.
But when will it pass?
So I left. I left. Didn't work for 11 months.
I said to her, the business that you're in is just so arbitrary and it's so much out of your control that I think what you should do is start a business of your own, such as fashion.
I'd go to young designers, unknown at that point. I'd buy clothes, I'd dress people. Frank said, why don't you turn it into a real business? And he made me a little office in a closet.
She did $600,000 worth of business out of that closet. And my mother said to me, in Italian, "Don't screw this one up because I like her better than you."
I never advertised, ever. And I had a ton of clients, and I sold all the daytime soaps.
Her old friend Bob Woods became a devoted customer.
So I brought him a bunch of stuff, and I laid him out on a bed, and he went, "Geez, I love that, and I love this, and I like that, I'll take that." So we put together a wardrobe for him.
So then I get a call from my accountant, and he says, "I got to ask you a question." And I said, "What is it?" And he says, "Are you seeing somebody on the side, like an escort service or something?" I said, "No, why? What are you talking about?" He said, "I've got these bills like $600, $800, $900 from something called Strictly Personal." I said, "No, that's Linda Dano. Those are clothes."
Linda was contemplating giving up acting altogether when she was offered another role, Felicia Gallant in Another World.
It was a great part. She wore feathers and diamonds, and she was bigger than life.
She said to me, "How should I play this?" And I said, "More people are in love with Linda Dano than any character you will ever play. So I think you should do you."
I knew what that meant, but I couldn't do it. I was too afraid to do it. And it's only after being on a soap where you could try things every day, or certainly 3 or 4 times a week, that I got braver and braver and braver. And I would see it work.
Linda was growing as an actress, and her new confidence spilled over into other areas of her life. She managed to end the bulimia that had endangered her health for over 20 years. With that victory, everything seemed possible. Since her character on Another World was a romance novelist, Linda wrote one of her own.
It was called Dreamweaver by Harlequin. And it was a real romance novel that I sort of co-wrote with someone else. I say co-wrote, we chatted a lot.
The madcap Felicia Gallant had crazy adventures. Brett Collins, the little person who played Wallingford, was one of her favorite sidekicks.
He's changed the perception of people. People that have never known a small person, never interacted with them.
Acting in a soap and running a fashion business were outlets for 2 of her talents, but Linda still had another gift that wasn't being professionally employed, the gift of gab. That talent was to find an outlet in Lifetime's 1986 daytime talk show, Attitudes.
I came on with Nancy Glass, and what it really was a show about women, for women, by women.
We were a great combination because I was somebody who was a very experienced interviewer, but I didn't know how to be myself. She knew how to be herself completely and didn't know how to interview.
And there were some very funny moments on it. In one in particular where she's rappelling off this mountain, and she had hair extensions put in her, and one of the extensions gets caught in the rigging.
Oh my God, my extensions are caught. Hold on. Oh my God.
She was hanging like a salami. It was like Lucille Ball.
It was a very inventive show. We'd have Claude Montana and Ralph Lauren and Donna Karan and Lewis, and we got everybody.
It was like the show before The View. And it was unique. And she was unique. And people really related to her, her look, and what she said, and the people she brought on.
She had shoulder pads. I thought we'd have to move the door jambs. And she would always kiddingly say that Frank would send her off to work going, "Go for it, girl."
They all love Frank. They meet him at some function and they go, "God, you need to come on the show." And like a fool, he goes.
And it was on for 6 years. It was nominated many times for an Emmy.
I did Another World, Attitudes, and I still had Strictly Personal going. It was craziness.
She just goes. And goes and goes. It's like that rabbit. She's the energizer.
It's also a great belt.
And in the early 90s, Linda added yet another job to her resume, accessories designer. She was asked to create a line of accessories for QVC, which she has sold very successfully on air.
The advantage of being on QVC is the fact that you reach so many millions of women. I mean, there's 56 million viewers. QVC is bringing celebrities in to actually design product for them because people know who we are.
I don't know how Linda does what she does. It must be just loving doing it. Because when you do what you love, you get filled up by it. It doesn't take away, it fills up.
But as much as Linda loves her work, she loves her family more.
I've seen Linda do all of the 18 jobs that you've referred to. And then when I ask, what do you want to go out for dinner? No, I have to go home and cook for Frank tonight.
It's my way of saying to Frank that I love him most. I cook fresh, I'm Italian, and I come home and I make it, and I do it with good cheer. I think it subliminally says to my husband how important he is to me.
Coming up on Intimate Portrait, Linda tries to unite her family once more and ends up in a nightmare.
The feeding tube, I signed off on it. It's the one probably single greatest mistake I've ever made in my life. It's the one I'm most guilty about, bar none.
Intimate Portrait will be back in a moment. I'm Judith Light, and this is Linda Dano, An Intimate Portrait. On another world, Linda's character Felicia had married many times, but the husband she loved the most was Lucas, played by her old friend, John Aprea.
We had been young lovers that had a terrible thing happen to us, and she was taken away from me as teenagers. And we come together 20 years later as adults. And we set out on the search for our child. And we found two.
And the powers that be decided to make me, Lorna Devon, the bad girl, Felicia Gallant, the good girl's daughter. And Linda and I were so excited.
Alicia was smart enough to know that she had great talent and she had a lot of energy and a lot of confidence, but she knew that Linda was someone who could show her things that she needed to know.
I think on another world, Linda became, for me, a real surrogate mother. And we had a very special relationship.
I loved her, still do. And then I had another daughter who replaced Alicia when she left the show. And her name is Robin Christopher, and I'm playing now with her at One Life to Live.
With John, they had this tremendous love affair on screen. And both of them together, you know, they were the two Italians who just came together, and boy, sparks flew everywhere.
Charlotte stared at this dark, handsome man. This is the man that she would love forever.
When I died on the show, I thought I was going to drown. I mean, she was crying so much. I literally was soaking wet. Yeah, she's a hell of an actress.
When Felicia's husband Lucas was killed, Felicia memorably took to drink.
I tried. I even believed you when you said you stopped drinking.
I didn't say I stopped drinking. I said I stopped over drinking. There's a difference. I can't have a drink. I don't care what this so-called expert tells you.
The end result of becoming an alcoholic won me an Emmy.
When she won the Emmy, she came home. It was like 2 in the morning. She puts the Emmy down on the kitchen counter, and she's got $1,300,000 or something worth of Van Cleef & Arpels jewels on, and she reaches and grabs a pot. And I said, "What are you doing?" She said, "I know you're hungry. I'll make you a little pasta. I'll make you a salad, a small salad, and we have that half a bottle of wine." And again, you know, you look at her and go, God, that's who she is. You go, you win the Emmy, you come home, you cook. You know? So my mother was right.
In the early 80s, Linda and Frank had bought and restored an 18th century farmhouse in Connecticut.
I loved old houses, and I got her started.
I started to really become knowledgeable about 17th and 18th century antiques. And my parents were getting older. I knew that one day they would come and live with us. We ended up selling that house. Then we bought land in another town, up further in Connecticut. We decided we would take down 2 early houses and re-erect them on this land.
And we have a house that is like a museum. Most people come in the house, they're very, you know, they're sort of taken back because it's like stepping back into the 18th century.
And every nail in the house is from the 17th century, every piece of wood. every single thing in that house, except maybe the kitchen, which has a facade of 17th century, but then you open the dishwasher and there's an actual dishwasher there. I don't think they had a dishwasher when Paul Revere was riding through Connecticut.
When I get to the corner where the first big meadow is, and I know I'm going to see the house in about a minute. And when I see it, I go, my house. There's something about that house for me that makes me know that everything is right in the world. For me.
Linda, who was still very close to her parents, had made frequent trips to California to visit them in their retirement community. The family was concerned about Ted, who had signs of dementia.
He would just have these moments where he would get very anxious and he would break things up, or he'd be frantic about his keys or his wallet.
Now that the new house was finished, the time came for Linda's parents to move east. But the plane ride to New York set off a crisis for Ted.
He wanted to get off of the plane while we were up in the air. It was pretty sad, really. It was very sad.
My father got completely frantic and didn't know what was happening and got afraid, which is what happens with Alzheimer's patients. You're not to move them out of their environment, only I didn't know that then. So Frank was helping my father in the airplane, and he was trying to lift up my father's pants after he had taken him in to go to the bathroom, and my father decked him, hit him in the mouth and cut his lip, and oh boy. When they finally got to the apartment, and I opened the door, and I looked at Frank, his lip was all swollen and cut. I said, what happened? What's wrong with you? What happened to your face? He said, I'll tell you later. I thought, oh my God. And then it was 4 days out of a Stephen King novel.
And the next morning when I went in to dress him, he was screaming in pain. So I thought maybe he had broken his hip and, didn't know it. So we took him to the hospital, and he literally never came out.
And at one point, my father stopped eating. And you talk about being in over your head. I didn't know what to do. And all the doctors said to me was you can't let him die like this. He'll starve to death. It's just a horrifying way to die. And I didn't know. And I completely short-circuited his living will. And I gave him a feeding tube.
She opted for that. And he lived for another 2 years with a feeding tube. Just being totally out of it.
My father was strapped to a wheelchair in a nursing home, crying, chewing on his tongue, babbling. Took 5 people to get him in and out of bed. This was John Wayne.
Her father lingered for 2 years more before he died, and during this time Linda drowned her guilt and grief through eating. Since she had conquered her bulimia, the weight was piling on.
I would leave another world, and I would take my truck, and I'd drive through the drive-in part of McDonald's. And I'd get a Big Mac, fries, Coke, and one of those apple turnover things. And I would eat that all the way through the tunnel, back into the city, and then I'd get home, make dinner, and have dinner, of course. Because God forbid anyone should know I'm doing the McDonald burger. I just got fatter and fatter and fatter. No one ever said anything to me.
A short vacation trip with her mother and Frank to Italy and Eastern Europe gave her room to find the perspective she needed. When she came home, she took herself in hand.
I sat in my living room. I'll never forget it. It was a Wednesday night. And it was dark. No one was in there but me. And I didn't turn any lights on. And I had a talk with myself. What are you doing? You are self-destructing. Is this what your plan is? You think this is going to help your father? It was like the turning point. And I stopped and lost the weight.
By 1997, Linda was back on track. That year, she published a book of fashion advice, Looking Great, which led to a series of fashion columns for Soap Opera Digest and New Choices magazines, and then to another book, Living Great. But on the set of Another World, Linda, whom Soap Opera Weekly named one of the 50 most beautiful people in the soaps, was becoming dissatisfied with her looks.
I just hated my jowls. Every time I made myself up, every time I saw myself passing in a mirror, that's all that I focused on.
One morning on the Regis and Kathy Lee show, Linda startled everyone by announcing she planned to have a facelift.
And her bravery about the facelift is something that just blew me away. And nobody was more, I mean, just in your face, pardon the in your facelift, more about it than Linda.
It's one more example of how open she is. And I guess if you don't have a secret, you don't have to worry about keeping a secret.
And she promises to come back and be the first appearance she does would be on our show.
And Another World had folded it into the story that I had gone through a plate glass skyline and was deformed, and I had to go have my face done.
And she did, and she looked fabulous. She still looks like Linda, except younger and fresher. And like she's had a great vacation and had a lot of sex. She looks great.
Coming up on Intimate Portrait, it's the end of an era for Felicia and Another World.
She absolutely thought that she would never work again.
Intimate Portrait will be back after this. We now return to Linda Dano, An Intimate Portrait. Despite its devoted fans, Another World had been struggling in the ratings for some time. In 1999, a final decision was made by the network.
The producer at the time called, and when I heard his voice, I knew. He said it got canceled.
She says, God, I'm an old broad. I mean, what am I gonna, who's gonna hire me?
I thought, well, this is it. It's finally happened. I'm going off to Connecticut to bake bread and work in the garden. All my friends, on screen, off screen, all the people who put the show together, wardrobe, hair, makeup, they were all friends, they were all family. I saw more of them than I did Frank. And the fans, oh, they were so heartbroken.
The fans can't get enough of Linda, and they follow her. They've been very loyal to Linda from the very beginning of her career. She never forgets it, ever.
But as fans of Another World mourned, Angela Shapiro began to formulate a groundbreaking plan.
And so as we looked across all our shows, we came up with the idea of creating this character that existed on One Life to Live, that she played very, very many years ago.
ABC called and said, this is the deal. I said, can you hold on for a second, David? And I put the phone down, and I went over to the pictures of my grandmother and my brother and my dad, and I started to cry. What a surprise. I said, you did this for me. I know you did. You had a meeting with God, and you did this for me. Thank you. I don't know what to say. And I cried for a minute or two, and I came back to the phone, and, okay, David, now, what is the deal?
She cried for, 15 minutes? And next thing you know, her phone's ringing, and they're saying, now we want you on 4 of the soaps. That's like a perfect Linda Dano story.
Because what their plan was, is that I would end my run, as we all were, on a Friday and say goodbye to our fans. And Monday at 2 o'clock, you would find Linda Dano on One Life to Live, driving into town, coming back.
Oh, come on, don't panic. I'm not going to do anything reckless. But I'll tell you this.
And in the closing of that door, 15 other doors opened for her. And God, I always tell everyone if I could find her one more job from 2 to 4 in the morning, I'd never have to do anything,
Linda returned to One Life to Live as Gretel Ray Cummings, the character she had played 20 years ago on that same soap. Now known as Ray, she was a highly successful relationship counselor.
I stayed at One Life for several months, getting the character established, and then the story catapulted me to All My Children, where more of the story unfolds.
Were Sarah and Raymond Washburn my biological parents? Sally, for God's sake, just tell me the truth, please.
And then I stayed there 3 months, and then it sent me off to California to General Hospital in Port Charles, where more of the story unfolds, and then back to One Life, where I am right now.
Her personality is too large to be confined on one show. So she has to go from each one of them. She has to.
Part of my deal with ABC was also to make semi-regular visits to The View, which feeds my attitude stays.
She's been a guest on the show, and we just naturally migrate towards each other. We're both Italian. We're both, in menopause. And, and so we just have a lot in common.
And then it turned out I did her apartment for her, and we put it on The View.
She walks into a furniture store, that is what you need. You must get that. Get this, get this, get this. And I'm like, okay, Linda, whatever she said, I would buy. And she was right. And then her husband, Frank, just comes over to the house, to my apartment, and he rearranges the furniture. Yes, he's brilliant also, Frank. The two of them are a team. They're like Donnie and Marie on acid.
Linda, who takes nothing for granted, believes her grandmother Myrtle is the guiding spirit who has made all this possible. Recently, she visited the cemetery where her grandmother is buried.
And I found the grave, and she's next to my step-grandfather. And I laid down on the grave. And I stayed there for a couple hours with her. As I said to her when I was lying there, do you think these people here know what I do for a living, Grandma? So I thought about it, and I said, you know, I'm an actor, and I'm a working actor. And I have another job now at ABC, and it's going so well, and I just want you all to know that this is the lady who's responsible for all that. And I do believe that.
Because Linda is grateful. She's grateful that people even know who she is. She's grateful that she even has a job. And she's always been like that.
Linda had longed for children, but since she never had any of her own, she dotes on Frank's children's kids.
Linda and I have 3 grandchildren, 3 girls. And Linda is now in the position of acting out the role of Myrtle.
So when they say Grandma, your knees buckle. And I love, they're all girls, so I love dressing them. And I do it a lot. I love taking them places. I love bringing them things.
Her dogs also occupy a large place in her big heart.
My dogs are the kids I never had. I absolutely love them. Unconditionally, totally, without reservation. Enough is not enough.
They're very lucky. I mean, a lot of people say, God, when I die, I want to come back as your dog.
But Linda doesn't just lavish love on her dogs and family. She reaches out to help people through a number of charities as well.
HeartShare is an organization that she works very hard and supports, but doesn't just write the check.
It's a very sort of low-budget charity that services children, and every Christmas I get to play Santa Claus.
And I was the little elf, and I brought bags of toys. I go every year. And then they honored me by giving me the Catherine B. White Award.
When you hear of all the wonderful things that she does, you sort of envision a Mother Teresa coming in, and you should know that she is far from that. She's one of the girls. The most incredible thing about Linda is that she's so much fun.
Somebody who can have it all, can be it all, can do it all, and still is just so much fun to be with and to laugh with and to expose yourself to, and she's just dishy.
If I died tomorrow, I could never complain. I've been given so many gifts.
In addition to her soap success, Linda's made a second career out of looking good and showing others how to do the same. Now, if she could just let us in on how to be talented, happily married, and successful as well. For Intimate Portrait, I'm Meredith Vieira.
He's not a real FBI guy, but he plays one on TV. It's Robert Stack, trench coat and all, with another in his Unsolved Mysteries series on the bizarre and unexplained, here on Lifetime Television.